So here we are, we're at the end of the Middle Ages, and we've gone through all the different types of religious persecutions and the economic hardships. It's been a very challenging time for the Jewish people, and unfortunately, what we're going to cover here as we conclude this section is a very sorry event in Jewish history, the crisis of Shabbetai Tzvi. And to understand the background, we have to realize that there was a big question that was on every Jew's mind during this period, which was why? Why are we going through all this suffering? What is it all about? When is it going to end? It was remarkable. One generation after the next, it was so challenging, and the Jewish people are looking for answers. So this is going to be one ingredient leading to the events we're going to look at. Another important concept that we have to understand before getting into the specifics is understanding the coming of the Messiah. Now, the Messiah is the King of Israel. He'll be the future King of Israel. In Hebrew, Messiah, Mashiach, means anointed one, because a king, any Jewish king, is anointed with oil. So the Messiah, the future King of Israel, will be anointed with oil, but he's a regular human being. He's not a God figure. He's a mortal person like you and me, and he's going to be from the Davidic line, meaning King David was the ideal Jewish king. God made a covenant with him that the monarchy would always be from his line, and eventually tradition taught that there would be a descendant of King David's that would emerge, and he'd be the King of Israel. He's going to be the greatest genius and political figure the world has ever seen. And as a result, he's going to be able to usher in a new era. Here are some of the goals the Messiah is going to have to achieve. First of all, he's going to cause the world to return to God and his teachings. There'll be no more confusion in this area. Everybody will understand the nature of their Creator. They'll want to understand how to relate to him. And there'll be a tremendous desire to draw close to him, which, if you think about it, it's the most natural thing for any human being to want to know their Creator. I mean, after all, he created us. He knows what we're about. He gave us a specific purpose. He knows everything that's happening in our lives, and he's trying to guide us to a certain end, a certain result through the life that we have here, that we've been granted. So if you think about it, it's the most natural thing to want to do, and yet we live in a world where there's darkness. There's a lot of confusion, and somehow we can end up sleeping through it. Well, the world's going to wake up, and there's going to be a tremendous drive and interest and desire to be close to the Almighty. That's what the Messiah is going to accomplish. Secondly, as a result, there'll be world peace. There won't be any more conflict because there'll be clarity. Obviously, he's going to have to restore the Davidic dynasty, and from that point on, there'll be other kings. He won't necessarily be the final king. Again, he's flesh and blood. He'll pass away, but you could have descendants that will then rule in his stead. He's going to oversee the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the third temple, and Jerusalem will become the spiritual capital of the world. He'll gather all the Jewish people to the land of Israel, will come from the four corners of the earth, and will all be together in the land. And he'll reestablish the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin is the supreme court of the Jewish people. In fact, it'll be a necessary step for him, because the Sanhedrin is the one that has to acknowledge that he is in fact the long-awaited Messiah of the Jewish people, and anoint him as the king. So he's got a lot to do, and obviously when you look down this list of things he's going to accomplish, you can understand why we believe he has not yet come, because these things have not happened yet. And Jews are very rational people, and 2 + 2 = 4, and if these things haven't happened, then they haven't happened yet, and the Messiah has not yet come. One last thing to understand about the coming of the Messiah is that tradition teaches it's going to come after a period of tremendous upheavals. Mankind's going to be going through a very troublesome period in history. In fact, tradition teaches it's referred to as the birth pangs of the Messiah. It's as if mankind's going to give birth to a new era, but we're going to have to go through this initial stage of the birth pangs. And you can see for the Jews who lived in the Middle Ages, based on what we've gone through in the course, how challenging and difficult their life was, with all the different persecutions, the conversions, the expulsion from Spain, and the massacres. You know, the Jews in the Middle Ages are just waiting and praying for someone to come, the Messiah to come, to redeem them and bring them back to the land of Israel finally and end the exile. And this sets the stage for Shabbetai Tzvi. Shabbetai Tzvi was a Jew born in Smyrna, Turkey, and he was a young scholarly type. He was very charismatic, and at the age of 20, he already started to develop a following, and people started to suspect that he might, in fact, be the Messiah. He also had a very strong interest in Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism, and as a result, that also gave people a sense of wonder of who he was and the clarity and the understanding that he had. Now, the rabbis in his community were very concerned because they saw that he exhibited erratic behavior. He had tremendous mood swings. There were periods of tremendous highs, like manic episodes, and there were periods of long depression. But the people at the time didn't really understand what was going on with him, and this only lent an aura and a mystique to his persona. Eventually he gets excommunicated from his community. He goes wandering. He ends up eventually in the land of Israel, and there he meets up with Nathan of Gaza, a person that pairs up with Shabbetai Tzvi. Now, Nathan claims to be Elijah the prophet, because tradition teaches that Elijah is going to appear before the Messiah and announce the King Messiah's arrival. Many Jews end up convinced that he is the long-awaited Messiah of the Jewish people. They go around and they're developing a greater following, and I've read that there are about 30% of Jewry, which is a significant number. You can imagine, whole communities falling for the idea that Shabbetai Tzvi is the Messiah, and in synagogues, they made a special Mishaberach, a prayer for the long-awaited King Messiah. They did not take kindly to people who suspected that he wasn't the Messiah. And as a result, many people sold their houses and prepared to leave to go back to Israel. So they're closing up their shops. They're closing down their businesses. They're arranging travel, plans to get back to Israel. There's a very high level of excitement going on in the Jewish community. And meanwhile, the non-Jews that are living around are watching this transformation going on in the Jewish community. Shabbetai Tzvi is so convinced of his role as the King Messiah, he tells the people that he's going to go to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. And when the Sultan sees him, he's going to be so impressed, he's going to take off his crown and put it on Shabbetai Tzvi's head. Well, he gets there, but instead of impressing him, the Sultan throws Shabbetai Tzvi into jail. Now, his followers claim that perhaps this is the process of redemption, the darkness that precedes the light. Eventually, Shabbetai Tzvi is brought back to the Sultan. He's given a choice, either convert to Islam or die by the sword. And Shabbetai Tzvi chooses conversion. Now, unfortunately, many of his followers couldn't give up the idea that he was the Messiah, and they end up continuing to follow him, and they have a movement, the Sabbatean movement, and they too also, some of them convert to Islam. But you can imagine the Jewish people, they are devastated. Here we were after such a terrible time where there was a bright light of hope, at least for some, and now those hopes are dashed. Now, unfortunately, most rabbis didn't believe that Shabbetai Tzvi was in fact the long-awaited Messiah. There were those that did, but you can imagine how devastated many communities were, and their non-Jewish neighbors ridiculed them for putting their faith in Shabbetai Tzvi. So here we are at the end of the Middle Ages, and things look hopeless. How is it going to be possible for the Jewish people to get out of their situation and make it back to the land of Israel? What's going to go on in Europe that's going to change their situation and give them a whole new way of relating to the outside world? All those answers are going to come in the next session, which is going to be on the Enlightenment. So you're doing a great job for sticking it out with me over here through the Middle Ages. Let's do a little review, and then we'll pick up with the next video with the Enlightenment. So to understand the crisis of Shabbetai Tzvi, we have to understand that the Jewish people are asking the big question, why? Why all the suffering? When is it going to end? And at the same time, we have to understand the coming of the Messiah, who is a king of Israel, which means anointed one, and he's from the Davidic line. He's going to be a remarkable world figure that's going to mesmerize the world with his genius and bring the world together as one, to recognize the Almighty as the one God over all mankind. His goals are going to be to cause the world to return to God and his teachings. He's going to establish world peace. He's going to restore the Davidic dynasty. He's going to oversee the rebuilding of Jerusalem and the third temple. All the Jewish people are going to be gathered back to the land of Israel, and he'll reestablish the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, so to speak, of the Jewish people. It's going to come during a period of tremendous upheavals, which tradition teaches is the birth pangs of the Messiah. Enter Shabbetai Tzvi from Turkey, very charismatic but erratic behavior. He goes traveling, meets up with Nathan of Gaza. Together they convince many Jews as they travel that he is the long-awaited Messiah of the Jewish people. They sell their houses, they prepare to leave. He goes to the Sultan, and eventually we know the story converts to Islam. He has loyal followers, but the Jewish people are devastated. That's the end of this period.